Let's get started. So, hey everyone, welcome to Google Developer Student Club's third workshop of the year. I'm happy to have you all here today. Last workshop, we really started building our portfolio up. Oh, and let me turn my camera on so you guys can see me. Otherwise, it's very plain. So last workshop, we did start building our portfolio with the About page and a Contacts page. And today we'll finish off building the HTML CSS for the Projects page, which we really didn't get into last time due to the time constraints. And then we'll really dive into the JavaScript and how to implement that into our website. Now, on that note, if you would like to stay caught up with all of our events and activities and everything else with the links for meetings and all of that, check our link tree. It has really every important link you may need, and I'll be dropping that in the chat real quick. So right here. Now, before we start, let's introduce our speakers and our moderators. So today, these are our speakers. If you guys don't know me, my name is Max, and I'm a freshman in UCF, studying computer science, and I'm one of the new tech leads this year. And with us, we have Alex.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alex. You probably remember me from the first workshop, and I'm so glad to be here.
All right, and with us in the chat, we have Ethan and Ryan helping out. And if you guys might remember them from like the last two workshops, if you were present, they'll answer any questions you guys may have related to it in case we are not able to. And if anything, you guys don't be afraid to. You can just unmute your mic and ask those questions to us live also. Just like last time, today we're going to be using the two things that we did, VS Code and Live Server extension. I'll send the link again in the chat for VS Code if anybody still needs to download it. Other than that, I'm kind of assume everybody has it. Again, VS Code is free to use. You are free to use the alternatives as listed on the right, like repo, glitch, and whatever your preference is. And also, you can download the live server extension after you have VS Code installed. I kind of, since this is like the last workshop, I'm kind of assume everybody has their VS Code installed. But if you don't, please let me know in the chat, and I'll give you all a minute to download it, and then show how to get the live server extension. So I have the chat on my right here. Does anyone need any time to download VS Code, or everybody has it? All right. So I'll assume everybody has this, so we can just skip over that. Oh, okay. All right, Vincent. All right. So I'll give you a minute. Let me know when you have it done, and if you would like, or if you need me. Oh, we don't have the extension. All right. So just download it. Let me know when you have it installed, and I can show you everybody when we start how to download the live server extension. It's pretty simple. Oh, okay. So then, as soon as we start, I'll show you how to download the extension. So let me just go to the next slide real quick. All right, so today we'll be finishing off the pages in our portfolio and then jump into the introduction of JavaScript and some implementations we can do. Me and Alex will share our screens, and then as we code along, you guys can follow along and code with us. We'll attempt to go slowly, but if at any point you guys feel like we're going a bit too fast, let us know in the chat. Also, before we begin, I'm gonna send in the chat a zip file of everything that we did last time. So in case you weren't present and you would like to kind of like start off at the same ground level as everybody else, this zip file, it's a raw file. So if you have like WinRAR, you just unzip or extract everything from it and just open that in VS Code. So give me just a moment to find it because it is a little hidden. So let me go to my local disk, users, Max, documents, coding, and right here, template to send from last week, an original name. All right, so if anybody doesn't have the code from last week and would like to just start off fresh, that template basically has everything that we did last week, and you should be able to have everything that I'm going to start with right now and code along. Yeah, so let's get started. I'll do the first half, and Alex will do the second half. Now, does anyone have any questions? I will be showing though how to download the extension real quick. So in the meantime, does anyone have any questions while I pull up VS Code? So Vincent, do you see the code in the chat? There's like a file that you can click on called template to send from last week.rar. You just click on that. It opens a RAR file. It's gonna be a folder. You just extract that to wherever you want to open it with VS Code, and it has all the code that we did last week. So like the HTML and the CSS. I don't think does anyone see the code in the chat, or let me try to resend it maybe. Oh, I see it. All right, I resent it in the chat recent. Let me know if you see it now. Yes, sir. I see it. Do you see it, Vincent? Oh yeah. All right. So yeah, just download that, extract it, um, and then you have all the code that we had from last week. Now I'll give you guys a minute while I set up my screen and everything. All right. So chat's open. All right. All right. Vincent, do you need me to give you like another minute to open everything up, or do you have at least VS Code open with the code that we got from last week? It should look something like this: the 3 HTML files and a CSS. Oh, one more minute. All right, for sure. Yep. All right. I see you said okay, so we're all good. All right. Nice, nice. So, does everybody see my screen too? The Visual Studio Code and the website. Can you get like a thumbs up for that, or maybe like in the chat? Everybody sees my screen. Yep. All right. I see Camila saying. All right. Thank you. So yeah. So to download the extension, when you have VS Code open, there's like all these options on the left. There's like explore, search, source control, run and debug. But there's one specifically called extensions. Like there's all these like little squares. At the top, it has what you have installed. I have a bunch installed. But there's also the recommended. But you can also search for them in the marketplace. So you can just say live server right here in the search bar and press enter. And the first option right here, live server, is where you want to download. It's quickly just, for me, it says uninstall, but if you just click install, it should really take a second or two. And then it may ask you to restart the VS Code, or it may not. It just takes a second to download, and then it should all be good. So I'll give you guys all a minute for that, and then we'll get started. All right, so does anyone need any extra minutes to download the live server extension, or everybody got it? Or if you do need an extra minute, let me know in the chat, and then I'll give everyone an extra minute. All right, so I'll take it that everyone. Oh, are there recordings of any previous? Yes, there are, Timothy. In our YouTube, we have all the recordings for past workshops, not only for this year but also previous years, and you can find everything there. I don't have the link right now for the YouTube, but you can probably just search UCF DSC, and it'll probably pop up as one of the videos. And this workshop will also be recorded too. So let me get started. So let's all get started. So as we can see in the file, or what we should have from last week, and if anybody downloaded the file that I sent you, should have an index.html, which is this home page right here. Oh, right here. You should also have a contacts page, which is all this code that we had right here. Then we have our form for email, some links, some information about us. Remember, we are role playing kind of John Smith. You are free to change it to your own information though, so feel free to change as we go or later too. And then today we're going to work on projects real quick, try to finish it really quickly, and then jump into JavaScript where Alex will really present the rest. So to make the time a little bit to make things a little bit more faster for the projects page, everybody, let's go to the index HTML, the home page, right? Control A to copy everything or highlight everything, then Control C. And we're gonna just paste it all into the projects page so that it saves some time. Now, of course, we're not gonna keep everything from it. We're gonna delete basically everything in the middle. So keep the footer and the navbar. Is gonna just delete the bio and the title basically. So we have almost like a blank page with the footer and then our navbar at the top. So for the projects page, what I'm imagining today is that we're gonna have a title that says probably something like welcome, and then we'll have a container, almost like or a div that we're gonna create that's gonna hold all of our projects. Now we're gonna do something kind of different than we did before for the projects. It's similar to what we did in Contact, but we're gonna use this idea of cards to keep track of our projects. So to give you an idea of what a card really is when I'm talking about it, this is an external CSS that you can external like CSS resource you can use. Like, but this is just an idea of what cards look like. Or something that we're gonna try to or attempt to make to create is almost something like this that BOMA offers. Is that has a title, a description, and a photo. This is basically what we're gonna attempt to create. As you can see, it's a div called card, has an image, and some content is like the description and some title and so on. So it's kind of the idea that we're going for. So to do that, so to start everything off, we're gonna create two things. First is gonna be an H1 tag, so it's gonna be the heading for our page. And we're gonna call it, we're gonna give it a class of project name, or no, project's title, sorry, project's title. I got a little bit messed up here. And then we're gonna say something like, welcome to my projects page with a little exclamation mark. And then right below that, we're gonna have a div with a class of, let's call it container, because it's gonna basically hold all the projects. So it's gonna be almost like a container, similar to how we have here the context page is big container, except since we're gonna do some different properties than we did before, we're not gonna give it the same class, so we can actually change the properties and do different ones. So we'll just call that thing container, and you can see, you can't really see it, but it is present in the page. So before we really jump into the projects, we do want to make some changes to our title and make sure that at least we finish the title before going on. So in our style CSS, we're gonna scroll all the way down. I already have this like little nice comments to separate things for start projects HTML. So to specify that this is where we're gonna put the CSS for the projects. So you can free to do that too, or just put everything below each other as you go. So to specify the title, we're gonna say class with a class of dot projects dash title. And then we're gonna give it a first a color. Now the color that I want to use is the same as we used before for this title right here, this golden color. So to do that, we can just scroll up in our CSS and we're gonna find the top span, basically selector that we have right here. There's a color of FCA311. We're gonna copy that. Scroll all the way down and paste it. And that's the color for our title. Next, you want to give it some size because it is a little bit small. So I'm going to give it of 75 pixels. It is going to be smaller than the one in the about page because this is a longer sentence. So maybe like in a laptop, I don't want it to be too big and have like a bunch of, like it takes up too many lines. After that, we're going to give it a margin of 40 pixels. Now, this basically means give it a margin of 40 pixels on the top, right, bottom, and left. So this kind of as you can see, it kind of shrinks the margins from previously. So before it was kind of like more centralized. Now we're kind of putting it more to the top and more to the left. Now I do want it to be more at the top again, but I don't want it to be too much on the left. I want to have the same type of spacing we had previously on the about page. So I'm just gonna say margin left. I'll do something like 10%. So we can still see this little gap right here for the title. And all right, so that's pretty much all for the title. And this is where we actually jump into creating the container with all the cards and our projects. So let me actually close the index page, the projects page, since we're not really using this right now. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna, inside of this container, we're actually gonna start creating the cards. So to do that, it's gonna be almost like a nested divs one after the other. So stay with me. I'm gonna try to explain each div, why we're using them and how we're gonna give them properties. So the first div, we're gonna give it a class of is going to be basically just a card container. So this is where the, oh, I forgot to do the other code right here. So this is basically where we're going to keep the card. So we have the container that holds all the cards, but then we have another smaller container that holds the card itself. And then inside of this card container, this little small container, we're going to have a div with a class of card. So now this is the actual card that's inside of the little sub container for the card. And then for the card, we're also going to have a div with a projects, the class of projects, let's say project description. So this is where we're going to keep the title and the description for it. But I should have done this before, but on top of this div for the project description, we actually want to have an image first. So just like before that we saw with the BOMA thing, we had an image at the top. So I do want to add a image. And for right now, I just leave it a blank source. So this is basically us specifying the link for the image or wherever it is in our document so we can pull that image into it. Let me just double check. We have the card, we have the image, we have the source, we have the div class, the project description. Now, since the description is actually going to be below, I'm going to say project info instead, because since it is going to keep the title and the description. So let's just change that to project info. Inside of the project info, we're going to have a div with a class of project name. So it's going to be basically the title. And then right below it, not inside, right below the div for the project name, we're going to have a div with a class of project description. So this is my actual description now. So sorry for getting that confused before. And so we have the container, the card container, the card image, the div with the project info, a project name, and a description. Let me just double. Okay, this is so. Well, my mistake. Instead of using divs for the project name and the project description, because divs require a lot of like changing to basically resize things. We can, since we're just using text, instead of using actually divs for everything, one thing that we can do is just put paragraphs really. So we're just for all. Oh, this is actually changing every single div. So for this div right here, I'm gonna just, I don't know why it's actually doing that. It's like changing two at once. I'm gonna just delete what we just put actually, and just gonna put a paragraph. Paragraph with a class of project name, and then a paragraph with a class of project description. Sorry about that, because I have some type of extension that automatically changes the tags, and then ended up conflicting with the ones I had. All right, cool. So project name, project description. And then for the name, I'll just say project one, and that's the text. And for description, I'll say, hi, this is my very first cool project. Check it out on GitHub and give it a start. All right. Now the last thing we need is an actual link. So we do have the text and the title, but so how do our people going to actually go to our project? We want to have some type of link or button that they can go and actually be sent to a new tab that has a project like GitHub or wherever it's published. So to do that, we're going to actually use an A tag or anchor tag. This is basically going to have an href, which is basically the link of where our project is going to be. For now, I'm going to give it hashtag, which basically means it's in the same, don't move pages to stay in the same page, because we don't have really a project to show. Unless you do have a project to show, then just go right ahead and change it. And then again, just so that if you do have a link and you click on it, you do want it to open a new tab and not actually overwrite the page that you're on. So we're going to just say target is equal to underscore blank. This is basically just means that it's going to open a new tab when you click on that link. And then I'll say check it out. And when we save that, as you can see, we have our title, our description, and then our link right below. But it looks very ugly. So this is basically just the skeletons of everything. And then right now we're going to really get into how we customize things. So to start it all off, we're going to go to our CSS. Right below our project's title, we're going to start with the big things and then almost like go more details below and below. So we first start off with our big container. This is the container that's going to keep track of all the projects that we have. Now, I want it to be fairly big, so I'm thinking something like the one that we had for the context page. So I'm going to give it a width of 65%. And since we have a width of 65%, we can also specify a margin that automatically censors things. Now, I'm not sure if we went over what this means, margin with two values. So to basically explain it real quick, when you say margin, it lets you specify different amount of values, and it will do different changes as you do it. So if I say margin, I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, or just imagine this is pixels. So it's gonna say I want a margin, and then it says top, right, bottom, left. It's almost like a clock, like clockwise, going clockwise. It's saying give the top a margin of 1, the bottom, the right a margin of 2, the bottom a margin of 3, and then the left a margin of 4. So we can also do the same thing, but with just two. Oh, so sorry about that. We can also do the same thing, but with two values. So if I say just margin 0 auto, what this means that in the top and the bottom, we want to have 0 margin, but on the sides, on the left and the right, we want to have a margin of auto. So this is going to centralize the container for us, although we can't really see it. So to do that, I'm going to actually give it real quick. I'm going to give it a border. So this is kind of like just so we have a visual, almost like we can actually visualize it. It's not just invisible on the screen, but we are going to take it off later. So don't worry. I'm going to give you a border of 1 pixel. It's going to be a solid line. So it's not going to be like dash. It's going to be just solid straight lines. And they're going to be white. So this is basically our big container that's going to hold all the cards, as you can see. I'm going to just move this over here, separate this because they're kind of like different things, just style really. Next, so the way that we're going to keep the cards inside of it, it's similar to how we did with the context page right here, that we did flex so that we can easily justify how the cards are on the screen. So like left, right, start, middle, and so on. So to do that, we're going to make our container have a display of flex. Sorry about that. Give me a second to get water. Sorry, almost out of here. All right, so we have our display, and we're gonna give it a display of flex, and we're gonna say flex rep wrap wrap. I'll explain that in a bit. And then after the flex wrap, we're gonna say justify the content and space evenly. So before we explain flex wrap, so justify content, if you remember, so CS or flex justify content. It just allows us to basically just simply tell it how we want the content to show on the page. So by having it space evenly, all the spacing around the left and right of every element is going to be the same. So as you can see, space around leaves almost like no space on the ends, but space evenly, make sure that every left and right has the same space, basically. So it kind of centralizes things easily for us. So if you had just one thing, it would be only in the middle. And we'll have a better idea of that when we really get into the adding more cards and stuff. So the wrap, I can show it better. I can show it better when we have more cards, but to give you an overall idea, think about it just like line wrap. So in my Visual Studio editor, when I type too many characters in a line, so eventually instead of continuing out of the screen and then making me hover or use a scroll bar horizontally, it just wraps around and keeps going. So although it's the same line, it looks like two lines, but it's still the same line, because if I see like a new line, you see this is 25, but then this is still 234. So it just wraps around if we have more than the space that we have that we basically gave it. So as we have more cards, they're gonna go to new lines or new rows, as I like to say. That's all that it stands for. Another thing, this is kind of maybe not a big of a deal if you don't have a larger monitor, but to kind of show you this new property that CSS also has is something called max width. Basically, this means that there's a constraint that the width of this element or whatever element has this class can be. So as the screen size grows, since we're using a lot of percentages, as the screen size grows, since this is in the body tag, instead of the body tag, it does grow with the page. So if you have like a really big monitor, everything's gonna grow a lot, and eventually you don't want things to be too big. Like you kind of like want to have them smaller enough, or just not grow super big with the screen. So we can give it a max width, so it can't go any more any more bigger than this. So we're gonna say just 1,200 pixels. Now it's kind of hard to see, so I can kind of show you. I'm gonna have to like overflow my screen, but I think as you see right now, although it's moving, you see how it doesn't really grow in size, it's just going left and right. So this is just in case I had like a really big monitor, it would still centralize, but it would just not grow in size. So I'm just kind of like, oh, let me just shrink the minimal version. And I noticed that it's very dark actually here. Give me 1 second to start my camera. All right, sorry about that. Um, so yeah, this basically just allows us to like not have the elements get too big as we have bigger monitors and so on. So yep, so let me just go to my Visual Studio. Everything's good for the container, and then we can move on to the next thing. So now we're gonna go with our card container. So this is what's gonna basically hold the card. So like each specific card is gonna have this. So basically we want the cards to have like a width. I'm thinking like 3 cards per row. So we have like 3 maximum cards per row, and then everything else below just keeps going. So to really do that, I'm gonna give the container for the cards just a width of 30%. I'm not really giving 33% so that it would be like exact, because we also have to account for the margins, because we do want some spacing for the cards, because if we have like 33% and 3 cards, that's already 99. And then if we give it each card like a very small margin, it's very likely that it's gonna overflow and then have to put a card at the bottom. So we'll just say 30 to keep it safe. After that, we're gonna give every card a minimum width. So this is another property that we haven't covered before, but basically just like the max width, that you can specify a maximum width, we can also specify a minimum width. So it can't get any smaller than a certain width. I'm gonna say just 350 pixels. This is mostly for if you were like a mobile device, because like I think it's a little, if I try to shrink this, you see how although the container gets shrink, it's very hard to see because the card doesn't have a background right now, but you would see that this stays pretty big. So if you were in like a phone or something, you would still be able to have a fairly big enough size. Because if I was to give it just 30% all the time when I'm in a phone, it would literally look like this, but have like a white background. Where then like it looks very ugly. It's all like 1 word per line, and like nobody wants to really see that. But this is like the one of the little responsive things that we have done. Of course, like the contact page does suffer from not being like that. So there are some things, just want to really put that out there. It's not perfect, but feel free to really mess with things later and see what really fits well for you. And then after that, the last thing we need is a margin. So this is basically just spacing between each card. I'm just gonna say 1%. So it basically it's like very small, and instead of like it grows with the page too. So it's very minimal though. So yeah. Next, we're actually gonna go to the card class, and we're gonna actually give them first a background so we can actually see what we're working with. So I'm gonna say background color of white. And then we can see that this is basically our card. Now it is a little ugly. We'll get to it. So next, I do want to give it a height. No, not actually a height. Yes, a height, not a width. We want to give it a height so we know at least how big really things are. So since the card is inside of this card container, we kind of want to give him like a, if I was to say 100% height, there's some chance that he may kind of overflow the container. So just to make sure things are very nice in place, I'm going to say 95. So it's not as big as a container. There's also more spacing at the bottom and overall. So we have the heights, the background color, and then we're gonna have a border radius. So I'll kind of separate the height and the color, so keep like the same topics together. So border radius is more stylistic, just to make sure that we have some type of roundness on the edges, so things are not really like sharp like that. And don't worry, we're gonna remove this container or remove the border real soon, so that it's just so that we have an idea of things. So we have a border radius, a color, and so on. And the next thing we gotta do. So in my opinion, it looks really good. The only thing is that there's very, I know this is a little messed up. We're gonna fix that, but overall, it's very the text and everything is very close to the edges. I kind of prefer when things are a little bit more centered and not as close to the edges. So I'm gonna give everything. I'm gonna give the card a padding of 10 pixels. What that means is that between the content inside of the card and the edge of the card, there's 10 pixels of space right here. It's just to make sure that it's not too close to the edge. Now I know this is an exception. and we'll get to it when we start styling the A tag. Um, so right after the A tag, we're gonna get into our image, and I think this would be a really good um, point to really search for an image. So I'm gonna go to my Google and just search up something like coding, wallpaper, HD. So you can do the same thing, or if you already have an image that you want to upload for your project, feel free to do that at the moment. I'm just gonna get something like this maybe. This looks pretty good. I'm gonna right click. I'm gonna copy the image address, and then in our HTML, I'm actually gonna paste this link in the source for the image. And then when I refresh, you can see our image is here, but it's literally overtaking the whole page. It just doesn't care about the height or the width, and it's just doing whatever it wants. So it's a really big problem, and we really gotta fix that. So one of the things that the image, of course, is really big. We want to shrink how much width it has first, because as you can see, it literally overflows the card. So I want to make sure that the width is 100%. What that means, like you may think 100% means all the page, but no, what it means 100% of the parent, if that makes sense. So the parent for the image is this div class called card. So it takes up 100% of the width of this div. So as you can see, it tries to take up everything, but then of course there's the padding right here of 10 pixels added to it. The next thing we want to give it is a height, because in the end, if we have multiple images with different aspect ratios and like different heights and widths, there may come a point where one image is like a little bit smaller than the other and a little bit bigger than the other. And I kind of like to keep things very uniform. So I'm going to give it a specific height of 200 pixels. The only thing, it's very minimal. It may be more easy to see with other images, that if we do put 200 pixels, you see how the image like shrinks. Like it not only gets smaller, but it also like gets shrunk. And sometimes if it's too small, it may get stretched. So to prevent that, to prevent this like effects of like really messing up the aspect ratio of the image, we can give it this property called object fit, and we can say cover. So all this tries to do is basically put the whole image and fill it up this whole space without really messing up the aspect ratio. So the image looks proportional. It's just that it's making sure to make it as big as it can to fill everything up. So some stuff may be cut out from before, but it fills up the whole image and it looks still pretty nice. And then lastly, we want to make the image a little bit round so that we keep this like overall roundness of our website. So looking pretty good. Next, we do want to work on our project name. So this is the title that we have right here. That we have project one. I think the first thing we want to do is specify a font size for it. I'm thinking something maybe like 30 pixels or actually 28. Let's do 28 pixels because 30 may be a little bit big. It looks, I think it's very similar to what we had before. Yeah, it's a little bit bigger than we had before. So 28 pixels is pretty good. We're also going to make it bold. So that's why we don't want to make it too big because the bolding already gives us more size. So font, weight, bold. Someone, oh, okay, let me an accent. Don't worry. All right, and then this basically just makes it bold. And after that, we're gonna give it a margin. So as you can see, the margin around the project's title is very big, at least in my opinion. Oh, sorry about that. It's very big, as you can see. Like there's a lot of space between the project image and then the text. So I kind of want to make that smaller, and I'm gonna say just 5 pixels. So that kind of overrides the margin and make sure that it's closer to the title, but still there's enough space. Then after that, I think that looks pretty much good for the title. Then we're gonna get into the description. There's not much to it, as you can see. We're gonna do it real quick. So project dash description. If I know how to spell. Then we're gonna say font size, not font size. The font looks pretty good. I'm gonna say margin of just 10 pixels. Again, if I comment that out, this is basically making sure that just like the title, we kind of cut off some of the extra spacing that has around it, and just make sure that things are more nicely together. Since the cards are supposed to be very small, we want them to be fairly close to each other, all the content. So yeah, have the margin, and then last but not least, we're gonna work on the card, the A tags, so the anchor tag. Now, if we were just to say A tags, it would focus on every single A tag in the page, so also these links and other A tags that we see in the web page. But since we want a specific A tag in the card, we're gonna say dot card space A. Again, if you don't know what this means, you can just hover over in the VS Code, and it actually shows you like an example. It basically means any a tag inside of an element that has the class card. So since this a tag right here is inside of this div called card, as you can see, it's gonna get this specific style. So for this a tag, we're gonna say, oh, let me actually just centralize this. We're gonna say that first we're gonna give a display block. So kind of going back to what display block is. Display block is like almost like a paragraph. It takes the element takes up the whole line, or the whole space it has on the line, and it doesn't let anything share with it. So for example, if I had, I think this should be a good example. If I had two a tags, check it out. Let me say two. You see how they share the same line? So since they share the same line, they are inline elements. So they share the same line, only the space that's limited. And if there is a space left, they share with other elements. So as you can see, they're both sharing the same line. Now, if I say that they're gonna have display block, they each share. Oh, I keep clicking on it. They each share the whole line, and they have the separated. So although the text is only on the left, you can still see that it's still clickable all the way over here on the right because it's taking up the whole space. So we're gonna say display block, and let me actually delete this a tag that I made secondly. All right, and then to go on more for it, we're gonna give it a width of 50%. Now this is because we're gonna make this a tag in the center, so I want to take it like 50% of the width and then centralize it with the margin that we saw before, the way that we do it before. So we're gonna say margin 0 on the top and the bottom, but we want to give it an auto on the left and the right. It just easily centralizes it in the center, although the text is not centralized. Then we're gonna have a background color real quick. Let's do something like, if we say gray, this is a little dark, so I'm gonna say something like hashtag E5, E5, and E5. This is like a lighter gray. Let me just let me specify this is a background color. So as you can see, we have our background color, and as you can see, it does take 50% of the width. We gotta first centralize the text. So we're gonna say text align center. So now our link is in the center. Before that, I do want to give this to make it, I kind of want to make it look like a button. So I'm gonna give it a border, and I'm gonna say that this border is gonna be 2 pixels. It's gonna be solid. So it's a solid line all around, and then it's gonna be gray. So it's like the darker gray. So we have something like this. And to give you an idea, when I say solid, like the line is just straight up solid. Because if I said, I think you can say dotted, or I think that's right. Yep. If I say dotted, it is a bunch of little dots, but we do want it to be just solid, like a solid straight line. But that's why I would say solid. Next, we don't want the underlining. We want the text to not have this underlining. We just want it to look normal. So no text decoration. So text decoration none. And then one of the last things we're gonna do is say text, not text, let's say color black. All this does is make the color of the a tag black instead of the purple that we had before, or the blue if you hadn't clicked on it. So let's put that back. After that, since we are making kind of a button, we're gonna first give it some more spacing because it does look very squished. So I'm gonna say padding, let's do 5 pixels. So this gives it more space on all the sides. Let's also make it a little bit more circular or more round. So I'm gonna say border radius 12 pixels. And as you can see now, it is very nicely, the edges are very nice. They're just pretty round. And then last but not least, I do want to make it a little bit bigger. So font size of 12, or not 12, not 77. I want to say 18 pixels actually, because 12 is a little bit smaller than before. So 12 pixels looks pretty good. As you can see, we have our first card. It has an image, the title, the description, and this link. Now, what we could do, for example, is like, let's say I have like my GitHub, I have my project, I can just go into Href and say GitHub or HTTPS, GitHub or www.github.com. And then you see when I click on it, it takes me to my GitHub. So that's what we're aiming for. Of course, this is not really a project. You guys are free to change the photo and then change the a tag, the whatever link that is. Now to better explain the other things, I'm gonna just quickly, so in case you do want to make more projects, you can just quickly copy every card container, go to just give it some spacing, paste it, paste it, and paste it. As you can see, now we have 4 projects. Now this is what I mean about the space evenly that we had in our display. So if I scroll up to our container, the space evenly says that the spacing around each element is going to be even. So there's 50% here, 50% here. And then since we have 3 elements, now there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 sides, so everything has 25% basically. The wrap just stands for that when we reach the end of the container size, if there is more stuff to be put, it's going to go to a new line. So again, if I take out the wrap and I save this, you can see that it kind of overflows the container. It doesn't really care about the size. That's what happens if we don't have the flex wrap. It allows us to basically wrap around the container and then just continue putting on new lines. And everything looks pretty good. I think that's all we want for the projects. Last thing really is just to take out this very ugly border, and then now it looks a lot nicer. And then to show you the minimum width thing, you see when I have like on something like a desktop or not on a laptop, it should have like 2x2s. And then if I have it on a mobile phone, we have the title, then we have our projects one by one. So you see, instead of it getting shrank down to 30%, so instead of having 30% of the width, we have this bin width, because if I had taken this out, this is how the project will look like. It will look horrible, probably like unreadable. So we really want to keep this min width to make sure that it doesn't get too small eventually. And this is pretty much all for the projects. This is how the page is gonna look like. I hope you guys were able to follow along. And then other than that, I'm gonna pass everything on to Alex now.
Thank you, Max, for that like overview on HTML and CSS. So now we're gonna get our hands on how to write the JavaScript to add new features to your web application. Now, since we want to focus on adding new features, um, we're not gonna go over like some programming concepts such as what is an if statement or what is a data type, but we'll explain it along the way while we keep writing some JavaScript. So now, let me open Visual Studio Code, and I know you can see my screen. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, just let me know regarding the previous part. Please let me know, guys, if you can see something. Okay, I'm having some technical issues. All right, let me. Okay, let me see what's going on here because I'm having some tech issues. Let me know what you can see on the screen. If you can see the Visual Studio Code or you can see something or not yet. I don't know what you guys can see, honestly. Like
We can
having
see the Visual
also.
Studio Code, but like it's just blank gray.
Oh, yeah, I'm not really sure what's going on here. All right,
Oh,
let me
now
know
we
what
see
you
it.
can.
Now we see
You
it.
see it?
Yep.
Okay. I don't know if it keeps bugging. I'll just change it to main screen. But yeah. All right. So can you see it perfectly?
Yeah, we see the whole Visual Studio Code. Yep.
All right, perfect. Yeah. So you can see that we have a script file that is empty. This is just a JavaScript, or when we want to write like our JavaScript. Now, just as we did with the CSS, we need to make some sort of connection between the style sheet, well, between the JavaScript and the HTML. So we're gonna use a new tag called script. Now, this actually can be added anywhere in your HTML. You can even actually add it at the end of um, your body, and it'll still work. So we already added it here, and just let me copy paste it for our contacts page and also our projects page, since we're gonna work on those. In the meantime, let's see if we have some questions in the chat. All right, yeah. Please let me know if you can still see the screen because it's bugging.
Yeah, we see the screen. We see the HTML.
Okay, yeah, it's my computer is bugging. All right. Let me change then the screen there because it's getting a little messy. Okay, now I'm assuming you can see nothing. Uh,
We can still see the screen.
oh really? Because I cannot see it. Honestly, yeah. Let me share like the other screen because it's a little. So we're suffering some small technical issues. This is fixable. Okay. Folio. Screen one. All right. I don't know. Like I guess now it's fine. All right.
Yeah, we can see
So
it.
yeah. All right. Perfect. So now we're focusing on like adding this script tag to oral HTML. So we're gonna keep adding those. Okay. So we have here, can add it here. And just to show you that it like loads, we're gonna just try to print something to the console. So how we print things to the console is actually using some function called console.log. And let's just print a number, let's say 1. So for this workshop, I'm gonna actually use Firefox because for the purpose of what I want to show you, this is actually better than Chrome. So if we go to inspect, there's something here that says console. This is actually similar if you are working in Chrome. And you see the one that we just printed. All right, so this is very important to keep track of some information that we're gonna be showing. So if you go back to the code, the first thing I wanna show you is how to select some element from your HTML using JavaScript. So now there's 3 ways we can do it. There's a function called query selector. There's another function called query selector all. And there's also one called get element by ID. Now this one is no longer used at all because this is too specific to an ID. So this one will need to select any element of your HTML. We will have to add an ID to all the elements, and this is not efficient. That's why like the new versions of JavaScript came out with these 2 functions that are actually more useful because we can select classes, we can select a specific tag, or we can also select IDs. Now let's start with query selector. Now we need to have some reference to that object, which is going to be an HTML element, like an A tag or a P tag. So we're going to have some variable to hold that element. So there's 3 ways to declare variables in JavaScript. The first one is using const, which is basically a constant element. The second one is called let, which is the normal variable that you see that keeps changing throughout your code. And there's also bar. And this one is actually the oldest one. So we're not going to actually use it. We're going to be using const because for selecting one specific element, we're not going to actually make it change to another. So let's just call this, let's see what we can select. So in our index, we have some A tags here, which has some classes and even it has some IDs. Let's say I want to select this specific element in our HTML. Now we can say just the variable, let's call it link. And we're gonna make a call to an object called document. Now this document is referring to the whole HTML only. So it's not referring to your style sheet or any other document like pictures within your project. There's actually another object that is referring to that, but we'll look at it later. So now we're going to use document, and this one has the function called query selector. Now you're going to be familiar already with this one because if you can see in the style sheets, you already have like how to instance a class like using a dot at the beginning, or you have some ID, you use the hashtag. This is actually the same syntax for query selector. So you want to select, let's say, by the class name, which is nap button. We're gonna actually write dot nap button. I think that's how it's written. And if we go back to Mozilla, well, actually, let me see what I did here. Some technical issues. I think I didn't print it. That's why. Okay, that's why it's not showing. Okay, so let us print it actually, and you might see what I mean that we just selected the element. Okay, let's go to Mozilla. This says it's no. Probably I didn't read it correctly, and this is something you might guys want to be careful. Make sure you have those already like selected. So it says snap button. I don't know how I wrote it. Okay, yeah, I know what might be their problem. So basically, this can be added anywhere, but for simplicity, I'm just gonna move the script to the bottom, and that should fix the issue. Let me just move all of them so we can work on them. And as you can see, this is at the end of the body, so please do that when you get to work on this. So let's move this. Okay, now let's go back to Mozilla. So now you can see the element. Yeah, that was because it was not reading it, but now we can read it. Now, the reason why I use Firefox is because I have a bunch of information about this object. We have like some properties, like, and some of them you might be familiar already. For example, you have an href, which is referring to like the actual link of that a tag. And as you can see, we're highlighting the specific one. Now, but let's be more specific because this class nav button is actually included not only in that one, but it's also included in all your a tags here. So nav button, nav button. So now what this means is that it's only gonna find the first one with that class if you use query selector like this. But if you wanna be more specific, you can use actually the ID, which I guess is called, what is it called? Home button. Okay. So we can write the same way using hashtag home button. And if we go back, this is still the same, but now it's gonna be like more specific. Now, what we did before can actually be better if we use query selector all. Since these all three elements have the same class, you can actually get all those three elements and not get only one of them. So let's actually do the same that we just did. So this is a console, well, then we're gonna call it links because we're gonna get more than one. And again, we're gonna call the object document, which is gonna have also the function query selector all. Now, what this will return is a list of objects or HTML objects that are referring to the a tags. So let's actually call the nap button again. And if we do console.log links, we're actually gonna get the whole list printed on the console. So if we go back, you see how this is called node list? And we have our three a tags, the about, the projects, and the contact. So this is what query selector all is used for. Like we can select multiple elements referring to something that they have in common. So for example, if we just write a, we'll get all the a tags within the document. And just to show you how get element by ID works, I'm just gonna say again, link to, and this actually belongs again to the document object. And by the way, if you want to know what is a method and what is the property of an object, in Visual Studio Code, you might see there is a blue cube. there's a purple cube that refers to the method or function, and there's a blue cube or box, and that refers to a property. So if we body says property as well. So we want the function get element by ID. And for this one, since it's already referring to an ID, we don't have to add like the hashtag. We can just write directly the ID. So let's say we want to choose the projects button. So projects, and then we have the button. Actually, I think it's called button. And we're going to do again console.log to just reflect what we just did. And if we go back, we're getting the element exactly as in the first one. So this is actually really good. And this is actually the way you want to implement query selector by using IDs. But if you don't have an ID or you don't want to declare many IDs for all your objects, you can just call the class or the actual tag. All right, perfect. So now that we know how to select elements, let me show you how to create an element in Visual Studio Code using JavaScript. So let's say create element. And now we're gonna basically use the same syntax, and we're gonna also use the document object again. So we're gonna use the declare variable that is gonna be our new element. Let's say new element. And because I want to show you what we want to do with this new element, let me open the actual final project so I can show you like what we want to achieve with this one. So we don't want to run code. We just want to open with live server. Okay, I guess it's like running. So let me just go back to Mozilla. We're just gonna, and I think this one open import 5,000. So it's 5,000. Well, 5,500. So let us see. Oops. Okay, and in the meantime, let me just show you what we want to create. Oh, I think it loaded. All right. So what we want to create is this small bar that makes a transition from one page to another. So let's say we're on the about page where we want to select projects. So you see, we want to create that move or that transition that makes from about to projects. And also if we don't select it, we want to make it back. But if we select it, we just want to highlight it with that bar. And also if we do the same with the contacts, you see how there's this transition again. And also we have this, what is it? This is small, we also have it highlighted here. So now let's create it. And this is an element called HR. I don't think you have seen it yet, but let's use it for this workshop. So let's say we want to call document again, and we want to find the function that says create element. All right, and this is a function, and just for sake of good order, this is usually typed in uppercase. So if we want to create a div, we have to write it in uppercase. If we want to write a paragraph, we have to write capital P. If we want to write an A tag, it should be A. And since we want an HR, we're just gonna write it like that's HR. All right, and since we don't know yet like what CSS or what we want to add it, let's just make some other object, which is gonna be a new link for our navigation bar. And I'm gonna call this social media. So since it's an A tag, let's just do A. And let me show you what it prints when I pass it to the console. So new link. All right. Let me see the console. Actually, this is the final project. All right, so this is the A tag that we just created. Now it has nothing, like all the information says it's null because we have an empty object. We just need like to fill in the information. And now, let's say we want to give it some content to our A tag. And if we want to do that, we have to find something within these properties that says text content. So it's in alphabetic order, so it's actually easy to find. So you just gotta look for the letter T. We have P, R, S, T, and here's text content. So let's add the text content to it. And I wanted to add social media. So let's do a new link. Oh, new link. And we already have some like functions and also some properties already here. We want text content. So you see how it's showing here. And since it's a property, we're not gonna have like parentheses. We're gonna just have an equals. And something I want to show you about JavaScript is that the strings can be actually inside single quotation or double. So either one will work. So let's say I want to call it social media. And if we go back to the code, or to the console, we refresh it because I think it didn't refresh. Now let me see the text content. All right, great. So it says social media, but we're not displaying it yet. So if we want to display it, we first need to say where we want it or in which element we want to add it. So if we want it to add a navigation bar, you're going to see on the inspector what class or what container has it. So we have an order list here that says snap links. So we have to first select this element, so then we can later add it using a function called append child. And I'm going to show you right now what I mean. So we already know how to select an element using JavaScript. That's what we did here, select an element by ID or by class. Since we only want the container, we're going to say const snap, and then let's call it document query selector to select an order list. And this one had the class snap links. Now, the way we're going to add it is by using a function called append child. So if you go back to the HTML, let's say specifically our index, you're going to see that this is an order list which has some A tags. So this one, let's call it this a parent like container, and this one had like some children. That's why we say append child for adding a new element. So let's call append child, and it's a purple cube, so it's actually a method. And what we're gonna pass in is the element that we just created, so which is snap. So we go back to our code. Let's just refresh because I think my server is not working here. I think I'm adding a null element. Let me see what I'm adding. Okay, yeah, this is not being added. Append child, the new child is an ancestor of the parent. Okay, so if we go back here, we're adding nap again. Oh, that was a mistake. We want to add new link. We can add a parent to a parent. All right. So if we go back now, we can see social media showing up here. But this is not actually an A tag. This looks more like a paragraph, and that's because it needs a reference. So if you can see, all of this A tags has something called Href. So we go back to inspect our element. We also can find that Href as empty because we haven't given it an actual address or an actual path that it should go to. So let's add that one. So you go back to the script. And that's also a property. So let us call a new link. And it should be href again. Href. And this is just a property, so we're just gonna set it equal to something. And we want the full path. Let's say we want to just to put google.com. All right. And now if we go back, oh, this is Chrome. Um, now we have the href already set up. So we click here, should take us to Google. All right, yep. Now this looks ugly, but we're not gonna actually work with this, so we're just gonna remove it. And we can just basically delete this, or I'm gonna show you later how to remove things from your HTML using JavaScript. So we're gonna keep that for later, and we're just gonna concentrate on the HR that we want to do. Okay, I'm gonna make a pause to see if anyone still has some questions or they need to like follow something that they didn't miss. Let me actually go back to this. And this is how to create an element, this is how to select an element. So we're gonna go now over like how to add some CSS using our HR element. All right, looks like no one has any questions. So let's keep moving. So now I'm gonna get rid of this because we're not gonna use it. And we're gonna work on with our HR. Now, what do we want to do with our HR? We basically just want to um, add some CSS to it and be able to do that effect um, of like that, making that transition from one project to another. So we're gonna have to use some new object called window. And what this object window does is just basically referring to the whole project, not only the HTML. So let's do console.log window. And if we go back to the code, well, to the console, window has everything, even has document in it. And it has some default properties as well. Let me actually see why is this showing this. So it has more properties than document. And even, I'm not gonna go over each of them, but there's many others that we can use, like, yeah, actually this is a lot, so we're not gonna go over each one of them. But this is gonna refer to the whole project. In contrast to document, actually document is part of a window. So what we're gonna do with that object is try to find what is the path name for this, what is it? The path name that we're in, to make that like, to highlight the actual nav link with the HR. So now let's go back to the code. And I don't know if you guys can still see my screen because I had to change something. So I'm gonna give it a minute and please let me know, guys, if you can still see it.
We can see the Visual Studio Code right now.
All right, perfect. Yeah. So now let us work with window. So what we want to do first is just say if, and what if is gonna be just a conditional, like if something happens, then do this code. And we're gonna just enclose it here. And this is probably this something that you've already seen in any programming class. So let's just keep moving and see what are we gonna do with this if statement. So now we want to use that element window that we just say, and we want to find something. Let's say we want to find the path thing. And I think Max, you can help me with this one because I think there's a lot of things in here. There's a window, and then we have to find the path name. So I guess you remember how to do that, right?
Yeah, window dot location.
Exactly. Yeah. So we gotta find location. So there's a lot of things in here. So let's go to back to L. So you see location here.
We actually only see your VS Code. We don't see
Oh,
the web
really?
page. Yeah.
All right. So if we scroll down, because there's a lot of elements, there's actually gonna be a location here. And location is actually gonna give us the path name. Now let me open this with Chrome because actually that's something that is gonna be a little better in this case, let's say. So let's do Chrome. I think I'm only sharing one single screen. So now you can see Chrome. Let me just go to inspect. And let's see, where is the console? So we have window. And let's find the location. So location should be right in the bottom, which is because it's L. So let's see, location. Actually, I think I passed it because this is already, so location. Okay, here's location. And we have some, actually, I don't think it was location. Or this is not the location I'm trying to find here. I think there's two locations apparently. So yeah, this is the one I want to find. So it's actually look at the darker purple one. And this one has some other reference, but we actually want to focus on the path name. So, but the path name is gonna be, it's just gonna be like what we see, for example, here on top. It says presentation portfolio in this .html. That's the path name. So we want to be able to, so we're just gonna copy that for now. And let me show you what I mean that that's the path name that we wanna do. So let's go back to the JavaScript. So there's two things we want to check. We want to check location, which is gonna store the path name. And we also have path name here. And I'm gonna explain later what is this triple equals because this is actually different than the double equals for setting equal to. But we're gonna use triple equals. And we're gonna set that to the path name. Now, what this statement is saying, if we're in that specific page, we want to be able to do something or add the element HR or something. But we want to add some CSS because we don't like this how it looks. So again, the way to add CSS to some element will be just using the window. What is it? The window object. I don't know why what's my screen going like this. Wait, hold on, I'm having some technical issues. Sorry about that. Okay, so we want to do window, but we actually want to give in some CSS by using some other property. So we're gonna look at something called, actually, let me remember. I don't think it was window. Sorry, my bad. It was not window. I think it was new element. Yeah, because what we wanted to is the element, not the window. So there's something called style here. Let me just put it. Style. And this one has all the CSS styles that we already seen before. Right? So you're already seen align content probably, or like align items. You might want to see background color somewhere, background. So these are all the CSS styles. And now we want to add some width. To our JavaScript file. So we're just gonna set it equal to, and we had to pass in a string. So I guess for this one was, if I don't remember, to 1.2%, because we don't want it to have it that big for the about link. Actually, my bad, this is 18%. That's too small. So let's see how it's looking right now. Let me share Mozilla because that's working on right now. Okay, so we didn't add it, and that's because we didn't add the element. So let's add the element to our nav link bar, well, nav link container. So let's do, we already know how to select elements, so let's do again, just nav link, and let's call it dot nav link, and the string nav links. Okay, perfect. Now we want to add the element. So if you remember, we used a function called append child for this. And we're going to pass in that new element that we just created. All right. And actually, let's do that at the end after we just give in the CSS style. So now let's see how it's looking, because I don't think it's looking that good right now, but we'll make it some nicer adjustments to it. So now you can see it looks like this. So it's not really aligned with the about. So let's add in some margin left. So the margin left for this one, I think it should be really small because we want it like more to the left. So let's just add a new element.
Oh, by the way, Alex, we can't see your VS Code.
Oh, why is this happening right now?
I think you're sharing just like the Firefox window. That's why.
Okay, probably that's why. Yeah. All right. So now, as I was saying, we're gonna add a style that's gonna be the margin left, and let us do just now. What I want to do next is just do the same thing we just did for the previous one, but we're gonna actually add it for the projects, because as you can see, it's not being added for, well, it's actually a whole line, so that's not what we want. So let's go back to the JavaScript. Um, let's see what else we can add here. So now what we're gonna add is actually the same exact thing, but now we're gonna do it for projects. Well, contacts and projects. And if you go back to the portfolio, I don't know if I still printing it, but let's see. Okay, yeah, I'm not printing window. Let's print window again just to show you what I mean. So if we go back to the JavaScript, let us print window console.log window. We're gonna actually see again, the path name is different. And actually, let's do it in Chrome because this is actually really messy here. So we go back to location. Remember, that's the property. Location. There you go. So the path name is still index, but then if we go to projects and we go back to location, now this is different. This says this project HTML. And we go to contact, it's gonna be the same. Where is it? Location. Yeah, this is a little messy to look for information, but yeah. So you see how the contact page has a different path name. So that's why we're changing just the path name here. So if we go back to the JavaScript, we're just gonna change the width. I guess for this one, 23.8 will be fine since there's not many like, actually, no, let me just put a 24.5. And that's for margin left, my bad. The width, I'm guessing it's gonna be a little smaller. Ah, my bad. This is 224.5. Sorry, I'm trying to work today. But yeah. And the margin left is gonna be more to the right. So we're gonna add more margin left to this. And let me give it a, let me give it a 23.8 maybe, or what it will look better than this one. Okay, let's give it a 31 because actually let's play around with this to see how it keeps looking. 31. And let's
One
say,
thing, you do have a double percentage in the width for the
oh, good catch, good catch. Perfect. So now I think I added this for the contacts. Okay, for contacts. So let's go back to our portfolio. All right, so contacts has this one, and apparently it's not applying the CSS. Why? Okay, new element with margin left. Yeah, it should be good. I don't know why it's not showing the actual. So new element style with. No, that should be good. I don't know why it's not applying it.
oh, I think the page is called contact, not contacts.
Oh, it's contact only? I thought it was contact. Okay. Yeah, some technical issues, but yeah. Let's see the Firefox. No, I hopefully you can see it now. So that was for projects, I guess. Yeah, that was for projects, my bad. So let's just swap them a little. And now this should be now for projects. Let me, so we're just gonna change. I just changed it. I don't think I was not sharing the screen, but this was contacts. So now we change to projects, and this will be changed to contact instead of project. Now for the contact, let's add some more width, some little less width, like 23.8. And for the margin left, I don't know, Max, you're gonna tell me what I'm sharing because I'm not really looking at what I'm sharing. I guess
You're
I'm sharing.
sharing the VS Code, yep.
All right, perfect. Yeah, thank you. So now, what I want to add it like let's say a margin left to of 67.2, and that's because that's the rightmost. So let's look back on the code and see how it's looking. Okay, we were able to make that highlighting, but still looks ugly. So, and what I want to do first actually is just get rid of this underline on the A tag. So let's go back to the code, but let's go back to the HTML. So the HTML has that, and actually, my bad, it's the CSS. So I think you already were given this file, so you're gonna find at the end there's something called nav button hover. So we have it as underline. We don't want that, so we're just gonna put instead none in text decoration. And if we look back, now we're gonna get rid of that like line that was hovering every time like we were like hovering one element. So that's actually really good. But now it's not making the transition. And this is something we might want to do with CSS. So let's go back to the code. And what I'm actually gonna do is actually it's gonna create some CSS in here for this one. So let me do some Actually, let us add it where it belongs. So it should be like HR. And the element is already created. So don't worry if you don't have it in the HTML. It's going to be actually added from the JavaScript. So we want to do HR somewhere. Let us put it here because there's a H1 here. So let's put HR here. And now what I want to add to the HR is just some like width of, let's say the width for this one will be just 18%. And this will change actually depending on what will be highlighted. But for now, it's going to be just 18%. And now we're going to do margin left. And this is probably the same one um, from the about a tag. So we want some height because if we look back, the height of the web page is not really good. It's like really small. So let's just add some height to it. So the CSS, actually I lost it. Where is it? Okay. All right, so this is CSS. Let's add some height of, let's say, 0.25 rem to just have something not that big. And let's give it some, since this already has some margin by default, let's just make it 0. And let's give it a color as well, because I don't like that gray color that it has. So I like this color orange. So if you can put it in the chat, Max, that would be good. So it's FCA311. And if you have the color palette from previous week, you actually gonna see that this color is in it. So you can just copy paste the hexadecimal value. And we don't want some border. Usually this one has some borders, so we don't want any borders. Okay, so let's see how it's looking right now. So if we go back to the page. So this is actually really good. I like this. And it's applying completely fine because of the JavaScript. But we don't have that transition that's occurring. How do we add that transition? So we're gonna learn a new property on CSS that is called transition. And if you can find, we're gonna leave some resources of what parameters it takes. But for now, we're just gonna do transition. And it's gonna take first the time we want that transition to occur. Like let's say 0.3 seconds. It's gonna take to do the whole transition. And there's different transitions, like there's linear, there's is in, is out, but we want is in and out because we want it to go back and forward. So now we go back to here. So you see how it's not applying, and that's because of the JavaScript. So what we want to do then is just if we go back, actually, I think I'm not sharing. If we go back to the web page, you see that it's not doing that transition. And that's because the JavaScript, it's actually not allowing us to do it because we just have like some style there. We're not having like the transition in and out there. So let's just add that in CSS. So if we go back to the portfolio, the way we're gonna do this is by adding again the styles that we have from JavaScript, but into CSS. So we're gonna add some elements. Well, I think this already has some IDs, right? Okay, let's say. Yep, so this one already has some IDs, but let's add some classes and let's do that using JavaScript because actually we're gonna need to add it to all our pages. So let's go back to the JavaScript. JavaScript. And how we're gonna add classes to it. Well, we already know query selector, so we're gonna have to select each element. So let's say const. I think one of them was the about, so let's go about equals, and we select that element by its class. Well, actually, let's go by ID. but we're gonna not use the function. We're gonna use query selector with the home button. And we make 3 of this. And if you want to do what I'm doing with this copying by line, you can just shift out and down arrow, and that should be fine. Now, I guess the next ID was called projects and then contact. All right, let's just make the same name. So projects and contact. Okay, perfect. But now we want to add the ID. So projects, and this is contact, not home. All right, so we have selected each of the 8 tags individually, but let's add a new class. So each of these objects has something called class list, and referring to all the classes, because remember that we can actually have more than one class in a single element. So that's why it has to be a list. Now, list in JavaScript has a method called add, and that's what's gonna add like a new class to it. So let's say we want to add a class called, for the about, let's say menu button, and we want to do the same for the projects and the contact. So we're just going to change the name here on the about to projects, and then we're also going to change it to contact. Okay, perfect. Now we just want to change the name as well. So let's call it just project button, and then we're going to call it contact button. So this is how you add classes. And if we go back to the project on Firefox, if we go to inspector, navbar, nav links, now they have the classes that we just added: menu button, project button, and also contact button. So that's what we are gonna use to add like that transition on CSS. So let's add actually in the CSS some new properties. So let's say we already know how to call a class, so it should be menu button, and it should be this symbol and the HR. And if Max, you would like to explain us this symbol, please?
Hi, sorry. So yeah, the if you hover over it, Alex,
Mm-hmm.
the little squiggly thing, it basically means that they're in the same like level, if that makes sense. They're both children, so like basically like as you can see the dot just means that they're like in the same level or right next to each other, if that makes sense.
All right, perfect. Yeah, thank you for your explanation. Great. So now we're gonna copy the same styles from our JavaScript to this one. So let's go to the JavaScript, and we can just copy just 18 and 1.2. And actually this is a width and margin left. So let's go to the CSS one more time. And this is gonna be width, and I think we call it 18%. And we have a margin left of, what was it? I guess this was 1.2%. So let's add that. And we're gonna actually need 3 of this. So, well, actually 2 more for the next ones. All right, so we're gonna change just the name, project, and then also contact. And we have the parameters here, 24.5 and 31. So we just put like 24.5 and 31. And for this one, the width was slightly smaller, so 23.8. And we're gonna have this one as 67.2. All right. But now we have to add something here. We're gonna add something called important. And what this important does is just basically takes over takes the precedence of the styling. So it's not gonna actually listen to the JavaScript at all. So this will actually help us have that transition in this case because it was actually listening more to the JavaScript than the CSS. So we're gonna add important to all the properties. So now if we go back to the portfolio, let me see. I don't know why it's not moving anymore. Let's see what's going on here. All right. I don't know why it didn't add here. Let me see.
You forgot to put the colon hover on the
Oh,
links. Yep.
right. So we always want to do when you hover. Yeah, that's right. So this hover was actually what we were doing when we select the tag. So for example, when we do this hover, when we select it, you see how it has a pointer instead of the arrow. So that's actually helping us like say we want this that when we're hovering. And you see now we can do that transition. So that's actually functional and that's what we wanted to achieve with the create element. Now, the last thing I want to show for this workshop is actually called how to handle events. Now, an event is actually anything that is happening in your workshop, your application. So we have, for example, this scroll, this is an event. If we click a button here, this is an event. If we have a contact and we start writing some text, this is also an event. And also if we send a form, this is also an event, but we don't want this to happen. So we're gonna be able to handle that. So let me show you the ones that we want to use for this workshop because we want to make this form on contacts page have some sort of validation. Whenever we write an invalid email, we want to show like an alert that says this is an invalid mail. If we don't have anything written here, we just want to have like all of it in blank. So let's do that in JavaScript. So if we go back here, I guess we can see the JavaScript now. Well, the Visual Studio now. Now, our next topic is events. So now the first event I want to show you is called the input event. An input event is when you're typing on your text area or your input. So for example, if I write my name here, there's an event, an input event. If I write something here, let's say my mail at mail, whatever, this is actually the input event as well. Or if we write something here, this is input event. Now, if we go back to the JavaScript, there's something called add event listener, which is the function that we're going to be using for handling those events. Add event listener. And this kind of like, as its name says, it's going to listen to some event occurring in the web application, and it's going to respond to it. Now, we're going to add again the object that we just saw, that it was well, actually, let us do first. Yeah, let us do one object so I can show you how to handle those events. So let's just do one for the inputs because that's what we want to show for this one. So if we go back, we should have some IDs for this inputs. Let's see. I think it has in div container and container here, form. Okay, and we have some IDs here. So we can just select those individually. Email, name. Let's just select name for just showing what we want to do. So we're gonna select name. So we already know how to select name. So document dot query selector, and let's put name. And now because I want to see if I actually print it correctly, let us just print it to the console. So let's say console.log name input, right? And now let's see what it's printing. Oh, by the way, you see that I sometimes don't add the semicolon. It's because in JavaScript, it's not always necessary to write semicolon, but for order, we just do it. All right, so we're printing actually in the console that input, and we have the specific one that we want. Okay, perfect. Now, if we go back to the JavaScript file, we can start playing around with it. And now, when you create an object, you're gonna actually have that method already added that says add event listener. And this add event listener is gonna take two parameters. One of them is the type of event that we're handling. So in this case, it's called input. And the next thing that it's gonna take, it's gonna be a callback, or what we call a function callback. And there's two ways to declare functions in JavaScript. One of them is the classic one that says function. And then we have this. But you're more commonly use something that's called arrow functions that are declared like this: parentheses, arrow, and brackets. Now, oh, braces. Now, what is inside here is gonna be the parameters that we want to pass into this callback. Now, usually when you're handling events, you might want to have some parameter here that like shows you that what events is doing. So by default, this function pass some parameter called event, or you can call it whatever you want. You can call it even event or E. I always call it E. So let's print actually that one. So console.log E. All right. Now, if we go back to the portfolio, make the console, and let's do some printing here, or let's do some typing. So you see how every time I printing, it shows some elements. So that's the input event. So if we scroll down here, we're gonna see many properties from that input because that's an object. And we actually don't want to print this. We want to be able to see the data in console. So for this one, we want to find something called target. So there's something here that says target somewhere. Okay, here. So we have target here. And what we want to find, it's something called value. And that will return us the value that is inside this input. So we go back to the end, choose that value. Value. Here. So now value has the value of Alex. And that's the thing that we're just typing in the input. So if we want to print that on console, let us go back to our JavaScript then. And we're gonna do e.target because that's the property that has that value property as well. And then we're gonna have dot value. Okay, and if we run this and then we start writing something in our portfolio, let's just say Alex and my whole name. So you see how it's showing on the screen. And that means that we're actually, the add event listener function is actually hearing that event, that input event that is occurring, and then doing whatever callback we pass in. So that's really good. Now, the next thing I want to do here is just like do the same thing, but for the other input and the text area. So now, since we are gonna do the same thing and we don't want repetitive code, what we can do is just have like some function that does this for us. And let's call it read input. And the way you declare functions in JavaScript can actually be just setting equal to just as a variable. And since we already know arrow functions, we're just gonna make it an arrow function as well. And just to show you that we can actually still have that parameter e, we're gonna put it here instead. We're gonna pass in this to here. And instead of just calling this whole arrow function, we're just gonna call read input. And now to see that this works for every single one, let us just make some create selectors for also the projects. Well, actually, no, it was not projects, it was email. Like that. So email, this one has an ID of email as well, if I don't remember wrong. Then we have message. Message. And let's also make a copy of this. And they're also going to respond to the same event, which is the input event. So we just call email and message. All right. So now we go back to the web page. Let us do some tests. So let's say we want to write something to email, email at. So it's working. Now, if we write some messages, blah, 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 you see how it's working. All right, so it's responding. Our add event listeners are perfectly fine, and also our read input function is working perfectly. But that's not what we want to do. I mean, someone is not going to expect to the actual console to see if we're writing the things correctly. So what we actually want to do is just display some alert. And for this, I want to show you first a new event before we get to the validation that is called submit. And there's another event that is similar to this one, which is called on click, or well, as I call it, just on click, but it should be just click. And that is going to refer more to a button and to a form. So let us show you how to use click. So we have a button here that says send, and when you press it, it's actually going to go to some web page. I mean, I already pressed it, but it's going to go to some web page that doesn't exist, and we don't want that. So we should be able to handle it somehow with the add event listener. So let's see what is the idea of that button. Okay, so it's somebody. It's not lab links. Should be container here. All right. So this is a div. Okay, here's the button. So it's a type submit button, has an ID of submit button. So we're gonna select it first. So we already know how to select elements again. So we're gonna just use some query selector. So we're gonna do const button equals document query selector. And the idea was submit button. All right. Now, this one, as we said, already has the event listener since it's an HTML object. So add event listener is already added here. And again, we're gonna have like the type of event, which is a click. And then we're gonna have our callback, which is gonna be an arrow function. Now, we always want to pass E, even though we're not using it, I recommend you passing E always. But in this case, we have a purpose for E because we don't want to go to that weird page that we just saw that doesn't exist. So for that, we're going to call some method called prevent default. And this is basically going to help us not going to some weird page that we haven't defined. So we go back to page. We're not gonna go there, but we want to make sure at least we're doing something. So on the console, we're not printing anything yet. So let's actually print something. Let us do, where is it? Do some console.log. Console.log. And let me call just on click. So now every time we click it, let's do just some tests. So it's working. So every time we click it, you might not hear it when I'm clicking it, but it's basically printing every time I click the send button. Okay, so that's good. But now we want to use actually on submit, because this is a form. So we're submitting a form. We're not like clicking and then we're not just clicking, we're just submitting all this information. So that submit event is specifically for forms. So let us create another event that says, actually, since I said it was for forms, we should create a new element, the create selector. And we're gonna select that form. I don't know what's the ID for that form. Let us find it on the HTML actually. Contact. And the form should be email form, which is an ID. All right, so let's actually add that. So email form. Okay, and this is gonna have a on submit event. So let us do add event listener. And the type of event is called submit. And we're gonna pass the callback, let's say again, E as our parameter, which is the event. And we're also gonna need this E prevent default as well. And let us do console.log. And let's say on submit. All right. So now if we go back to the web page, you're actually gonna see that this is only gonna do the on click. And that's because that is happening first and the on submit. So we don't really are executing the on submit here. We're just doing on click every time because we already declared it first. So let us fix that, because for the purpose that we want to use like the validation, we just want the on submit. So to show that at least that's working, let's comment out this. And let us now save it. And now let's go back to the page. Now we do again. Now it's going to be on submit. All right, perfect. Now, we don't want just to show something that is like on submit. Like you see how we're on submitting things, but this is even empty. We don't want to submit something empty to John Smith. We want to have some information, maybe your name, your email, and also like whatever message you want to tell him. Maybe your recruiter wants to send you something, but if there's no information, we want to avoid that. Or if there's some field that is incomplete, we want to avoid that. So there needs to be some way to store this information somewhere. And this is where we introduce objects in JavaScript. Now in JavaScript, the way we use to declare objects are by just calling const, and let's call it data. And we don't want to do like just equals and then like declare, I don't know, something like new, like in other programming languages. We just want to open brackets. And this is just kind of like if you have seen something like JSON files or something, this is kind of similar to it. So now how do we add a property to this object? We can just add the name of the property we want to add. So let's say we want to have name, email, and message. So we can just write name followed by colon. And then let's make it empty because we have nothing first. And if we want to add a new property, we just put a comma, and then we just write the next property, which is email, and we just make it empty as well. And we want to add the last one, make another comma, and we write the next property, which is message. Okay, we don't want more, so we're gonna leave it as it is, and this is our object. And we're gonna store the data here. Now, when do we want to store the data? We want to store the data when we're actually typing something here. And if we remember, we already have that input that says that we already have that event that is called input that happens every time we write something. So this, we actually don't want to print the console, we want to store something in here. So in order to do that, let's just modify our function that is only printing like the value of what we're writing. And we're gonna actually want to access the elements within the object. So let us declare it on top. So now you might see that this is actually similar to the ID name. So we have the same elements, the same properties in our data object, and there's the same as our IDs for each one of them. So what we can do is actually access this by ID. And the way to access each property in an object can be either doing data.name, but this is not, in practice, this is not good. So we can actually use it like in array form. So if you know arrays can have like index 0, 1, 2. Okay, but here it's gonna be the actual index with the name of the ID. So if we write name, that means we're accessing the name property within in the data object. But this is also not efficient because we don't want to write data name, data email, or data message. So what I want to do is actually call something in our E event. So let us actually print console.log E dot, and I want to put target because actually what we want to find is actually on target. So now let's go back to Firefox. Now let's write something here. And let us see if it's printing target. I guess it's printing target. And what I want to find is actually the ID. So you see how we can access the ID of the element? So that's another property from the event object. So if I want to add the ID, what I want to do is just index by the ID by doing e.target.id. And that's the same as just accessing the element by doing name or email or message. That's the same. But we're making it more dynamic. So now, in order to set it to the value that we're updating every time we do the input event, we already know where to get the value by using e.target.value. Okay, and to see that this is working, let's print the object console.log data. And initially it will be empty, so don't worry if you don't see anything at first. So the object is empty, it has nothing, but if we keep adding stuff, actually this is not the best way to see it. Hold on. Let me go back to Chrome because this is actually terrible to see here. Okay, yeah. So this looks a little ugly, so let's make it smaller. So let's do it to see, why is it not updating? let's go back to the JavaScript. Let's see how we can fix this. e.target.value target. So let us print console. Oh no, not here. And let us go back to Chrome. Okay, here it's updating. So that was the issue. Basically, we need to like make the console.log within that like input. Let's say email something. So you see how it's updating the data of the object. So we're gonna go pass right now. And then we write message as well. We're just adding some message. Okay, perfect. And that's how we fill in the element, well, the object data. So we can now use it for validating our form. Okay, so let's go back to the JavaScript. All right, since now we are storing the element here, let us do something with the onSubmit event. So now once we click submit, we want to check that all the fields are not empty. So we're going to use some if statement. And this is going to actually check if the data dot name is empty. And this is not something I like putting data dot name looks really not good to me. So I want to show you another way to do things in JavaScript, how to get those variables. And we're going to use something called destructuring. Now, destructuring is going to grab all the elements within the data object. And we must call those variables with the same name as the properties. So if we have a property name, we're going to call it name. If we want a property email, we want to call it email. And we're going to call it message if we have something that is message. Now, each of these variables is going to be assigned to whatever the value of name is, and also value of email and message. So now we can do just name here, it's empty. And let's look some logic operators to just add also the email and the message. And we're going to use or. And it's either this field is not empty or the next field is not empty. That's the logic of it. So as long as one of them is empty, it will still return the message. So let's say email empty and also message is empty. Now, what I want to do here is just some message function. So let us do some error. Let's create a new function, message, or let's say alert message. And we're going to take some message here. Let's say all fields are important. And we haven't created the function yet. We're just going to create it. So let's say const alert message. And it's going to be an arrow function. And remember, I told you that this takes the parameters that we're passing in. So in this way, this time we're passing a message, which is in a string. So let's pass message. And let's just print it to the console for now. All right, let's go back to Chrome. All right, so let's say we submit something empty and all fields are important because there's nothing. All right, perfect. But I want to show you something else. What if we still click on submit because we're still reading the event. So we want to also check that we're not submitting anything. So let's say we have passed that case. We're going to do console.log. Or let's say alert message, because we're going to use it still. So alert message, let's say submitting. Now, this is still going to happen. So let's say we just have it empty. So it says submitting. We shouldn't be submitting because we don't want it to submit something empty, as we said. So The way we can fix it is by using something called return. And this is just gonna say once we um put the alert of like all fields are important, we're gonna stop the function. We're not gonna evaluate whatever code is next. All right. So the next thing I want to check if the email is valid. So we're gonna do else if, and there's a property of the strings that is called includes, and that basically tells you like if a string contains some other substring or some character that we're looking for. So we're looking for the at, like all valid emails have to have like the at, but we're checking that it doesn't have it. So we should add some character at the beginning that says not. So this whole statement will be read as if email does not include the at, we want to also send some message, singular message, and we're going to say invalid email and return because it won't want it to submit it. Now let's go back to Chrome and we'll see if it's printing what it's showing. So let's say I fill in the information, but I don't have a valid mail. Let's say I have some weird letters. When I send it, it says invalid mail. So that's because it's not a valid mail. Even though we have everything completed, this is not a valid mail. But let's say we do have something valid. Let's say then mail, add mail, or whatever.com. And we're submitting the form. Yeah. But the user is not going to go to the console and see what's printing or what alerts is giving it. So we want to show something here on the screen. So this is where we add some CSS. And also we create a new element that is going to be like our alert element. So now let us just go back for one more time to the JavaScript. And we're going to modify this function of alert. Instead of printing just the console, we're going to create a new element. That's going to be our alert. So we're going to do document. And we're going to know how to create elements. We're going to use create element, document, create element function. And I'll just make it a paragraph. I don't think we need to make it an 8 type or something else. We just make it a paragraph. So we want to add some classes to it as well. So for example, if I want to add some class that gives me like a red alert when it's not when the form is not validated for submission, we just want to have some red alert. But when it is submitted, we want to have some green alert. But there's no way to actually check when do we want to add the classes for the red alert and the green alert. So what we can do is pass in a new parameter to our function. So let's say we're going to pass a Boolean true and also true. And what this Boolean variable is going to check is for the error. So this should be error. So it says if the error is true, we're going to add some if statement. If the error equals true, and let's just use the triple equals to be more secure. We're gonna add like the class to that, like to this element that we just created. So we're gonna do class list because there can be many classes for this object. We're gonna do add, and let's just call it alert. All right, perfect. We want also some text for this alert. We don't want it to just show there and be like, okay, let's just show about what we're showing, like we don't know. So you remember this object has something called text content, and we set it equal to message. This will contain the actual messages we pass in. So for example, it will contain all fields are important. It will contain invalid email, or it will contain submitting. Now you can see here I'm passing true and true here, but I'm not passing anything here because this is not actually that the error is true. It's actually should be false. But we can either pass false here, or if we don't pass it, we can actually assign it to a default value by using error equals false. All right. So now we can check just by doing else, because in Boolean variables, there's only true or false. And if the error is equal to false, so there's no error, the submission is totally fine and the form is valid. We're gonna add the same one, but now it's just gonna call green. All right. So now we're missing something else. We want to add this element somewhere. All right, so let's actually go back to the HTML, not the page, to just the HTML. So we don't want to include it within the form. We want to actually include outside of this whole div, this contact container. So we actually can insert it into the body. So let's go and select the body. Let us do const body equals, and to select the body, we already used document query selector. And we're just gonna call body because there's only one body within your application, so there's not many. So there's gonna just select one. And now we haven't added some CSS here. I'm actually gonna give you the CSS in a moment. So we're just gonna add this in body, the append child. Remember, that's how you include elements within some container. So now what we want to do here is just so append child, and I want to call just the alert. So that means we're adding the alert to our body. Now let's test it out. So we're in Chrome here. Let's see that we have nothing. And here's showing, but it's again, this is not like a CSS or something. But if we add some information, let's say it's something valid, we're not having submitting. And if we don't have a valid mail, let's say it's something weird, that's invalid. But something else that you can see here is that they're not disappearing. Now we want it to disappear when we make something valid. So now let me show you a new function on JavaScript that is called set timeout. So after we displayed that like element, or we append it, we just want to remove it. So we're going to use for that the function called set timeout. And actually you have some snippets from JavaScript. We're going to give it on our sources at the end of the workshop. This will take an arrow function always. Like, this is not a function, this is an arrow function. And we're going to have some time that is in milliseconds. So if it wants to be like just 1 second, you can put 1,000. If you want it for 2 seconds, 2,000. Let's just have for 3 seconds or 4 seconds, just for having more time. And then after those 4 seconds, what we want to do is do whatever it's inside our arrow function. So we already learned how to append elements or how to add elements to the HTML. Now to remove it, we're gonna just use something called remove. And that belongs to the specific object that we want to remove. So alert.remove. And this is how you remove elements from the HTML. Now, if we go to the page again, let's say we have nothing and we send the form. We have all fields are important, but after 4 seconds, it's gonna disappear. Now, if we have something valid and we send it, submitting, but then after 4 seconds, again, it's gonna disappear. Okay, so it works. But now, since we're already running out of time, I don't know if you think, Max, if it's a good idea that that I share the CSS on the sources and also in the chat so everyone can copy it.
Sure, yeah, I think so, yeah.
All right, so let's
Make
copy
sure to
this.
show it in the video too, so because for the
Yeah,
recording later too.
so I'm gonna show you the final version of it, just because I feel like we're really out of time, and I don't want to make the video too large. So let's actually show you the CSS for this. So now let's go back to the CSS. And the CSS that we're gonna add is actually called alert and alert green. So let me just find it because I don't remember what I put it. Okay, so here's the alert. And I'm gonna type it on the chat. This is for the red one when there's an error. So we're gonna put it on the chat. And we're gonna also add a zip file with the resources. So we have some width that is similar to the one from the container because we want the same width. Margin 0 auto means that we're centering the element. Margin top will be just to add like some separation between the container and the paragraph that we just added as the alert. The background color is gonna be some sort of red, pink color or light red. We're gonna align the text um, by using text align center. We're gonna add some padding so we have some separations within the container or the paragraph. For something just as small as just as 10 pixels. We're gonna have a color white for the font. And we're gonna make it uppercase. And to just have it nicely as the container, we're just gonna have some border radius. Now this is gonna be exactly the same as the alert green, but the color of the font is gonna be just zeros. And the background color would be just some greenish color, light green. So I'm just gonna put that in the chat as well. So now this is a complete version of the project. So let us do just live server again. Open with live server. And if you can see on Chrome, this is a final project. So let's say we want to include um, something here, let's say something valid. We're gonna send it and you see how we're sending the form and it's disappearing. So now let us do something else. Let's say I put everything right, but now the mail is not valid and this is just whatever. Now, okay, we have the invalid email that is gonna disappear after 4 seconds. All right, perfect. Now let's say we have nothing. Should say all fields are important. So there you go. You have your alerts. And what we just did up to the point that we stopped like writing some code, it's just adding the CSS that we had on the chat and that we also just shown and explained a little. And yeah, that's basically how we validate and form. And that's everything we have for JavaScript. So I'm gonna make a zip file from this and I'm gonna save it to the resources so you can have it like available for you to play around and make your own changes. And while I'm doing that, I think Max has some announcement for next month. So thank you so much for watching our workshop.
Yeah, so basically just real quick final I guess final words. Can you guys see my slides? Just my slides. All right, I'll take that as a yes. I guess nobody said no. I see the feedback form. Okay, yes. So yeah, so what I wanted to say is that basically I want to say thank you so much for coming, everybody, or everybody who couldn't make. I completely understand. I hope that you're able to see the recording and go back to the things that you need and other things like that. So the first thing is please fill out the feedback form. This is going to be open all the time. So even if you're watching a recording, it should still work. So please fill it out. Let us know what you think we did good, what we think we did bad, what we can improve on, and so on. We really want the honest feedback because that's the only way to make things better, you know. So please go ahead and do that. It really helps us and helps you guys so that we can make sure we have good content coming out and good events so that they actually help you guys and they are what you guys are interested into, since a lot of it also asks like what you guys are interested in. Second, we did save today. We did save everything that we did today, and I think Alex is gonna send in a couple minutes again in the chat a zip file that has everything that we did. So don't worry about. I mean, if you're already here, of course, don't worry about like having to do everything. And maybe if we weren't able to finish something that was just sent right now, I see it on the chat. Third, the workshop was recorded, so in case you missed something and like to go back to a certain section, it's all going to be there. And then lastly, this is something that we also shared last workshop, but in case you do want to look for more resources on again on the topics of web development, primarily HTML, CSS, and plain JavaScript, there is this Google Docs that me and the other tech leads have created that contains some links that we found useful in like learning everything. But of course, you're free to use your own. There are like thousands of resources you can find online to really improve and learn new things. So I hope everybody enjoyed this three-part workshop. It was definitely a great experience and really fun to build this portfolio with everybody. If you guys would like to have more events like this, please keep your eyes posted in the Discord, as we'll be announcing very soon our upcoming events and exactly what dates and times they'll be on. Please again, don't forget to fill out the feedback form, even though you may be watching recording or not. It really means a lot if you fill out the form. And unless you guys have any like lingering questions or anything else, any help, we'll just stay here for a bit. And other than that, thank you all for coming, and I'll see you guys next time.